If there's a grill I've been asked to do a review on more than any other, this is it. It's the Weber Summit Kamado, and today we're doing an unboxing and first impressions. Let's get into it. So I wanted to make this video for a long time, back to when I first started the channel and I owned a couple green eggs and I was able to use them to compare head to head to Kamado Joe. You guys have been asking to see the Weber Summit in action. And I want to thank Weber for sending this grill to make this possible. I couldn't have done it without them. I've tried to power through and buy a couple of my own, like the offset behind me, to make those videos and do a completely independent review, but I'm learning the hard way. This is going to cost me a small fortune. And so that's just not practical to go out and buy everything in order to do a review. So when I reached out to Weber and asked if they'd be interested in sending one along for a review, and they saw a channel and mostly a red territory, they said, sure, no problem. But I did notice in the unpacking material, I got a couple marketing talking points here that I'll share with you just so you know what I have to say. That's it. Absolutely nothing. So not only were they kind enough to send it, they also stressed that I am free to review this completely as if I had bought it with my own money. And so I want to thank Weber for not only sending it, but also for agreeing for the only way that I'll ever review a product on the channel is if I can review it as if I'd bought it. In this case, thankfully, without actually having to buy it. So thank you, Weber, so much for making this possible. Now, let's get into the unboxing experience and we'll get our tomahawk steak ready for our initial cook as part of our break-in process. So while I'm waiting 20-30 minutes or so for a break-in burn to finish before we get our food on, let me give you a quick crash course on the assembly experience. This was pretty easy to put together. All in all, it took me about an hour and 20 minutes. Not only the instructions and labels and parts really clear to follow, like a couple other grills that I put together, Weber Summit comes with a scan code, a QR code that you can open up in the Built app, and there you can get audio-visual prompts that'll guide you through every step of the way and make it that much easier. In terms of how it compares to other grills for the assembly process, let's start with a Kamado, as this is a Kamado category. I've owned 4 big green eggs that I put together and I've helped friends, so I'm probably in about 7 or 8 green eggs and a handful of Kamado Joes. So versus the big green egg, this is much easier to put together. Something like the green egg where the band comes all disassembled, you have to put all of these components together. And if you're uninitiated in this, I remember, kind of the first few times I did it, I was in the 3-hour range, and even with a bunch under the belt, it's still a couple-hour process. And you need a spare set of hands because we're dealing with much heavier ceramics where you just can't lift a base and a dome together single-handedly without the risk of potentially, dropping it. Versus Kamado Joe, which I've also assembled a bunch of those. I call assemble, it's really just unboxing, as Kamado Joe ships their grill pretty much completely assembled. No fuss with the airlift hinge, the bands, or anything like that. We're just removing packing materials, installing our cooking grates, adding our dome, and the only thing you have to put together is the cart itself. And so this sits somewhere in the middle of that experience, where not as quite open the box and get ready to grill as my Kamado Joe unboxing experience, but I take this any day of the week over something like the big green egg assembly, as it's much, much easier to do, especially single-handed. Everything went together, parts are well labeled and clear, instructions are clear, and as I said earlier, about an hour and 20 minutes. Once it's done its break-in burn, we'll be ready to get our tomahawk in there, but why don't I take you back a few minutes ago before we added our fire, and I can show you the internal components and what's a little bit different and unique about the Weber Summit Kamado. Pull our grate out. So down here, I'll do another camera shot in a second so you can see that, but when I move the system here, we can go from our air vents all the way closed to all the way open. Plus, when we want to clean it out at the end, we can agitate our charcoal using that one-touch system, and all the ash will fall down into our collector. Let me show you that. So here's a close-up look of that system. So right now, those veins were closed. Move it all the way open, and that would allow any ash that we have to drop down in our pan, and we can just pull that out and discard it once it's cold. I think we're ready to fire it up. Let's open our rapid fire damper. We could open this all the way up and give it maximum air. We're gonna go for the low position, put our charcoal grate back in, add some charcoal, Trailblazer grill gun, fire it up. Heat deflector, cooking grid, let that come up. While we're waiting for this to warm up, let me show you the porcelain enamel coated steel and just how resistant this is for scratching. I hate doing this, but trust me, it's going to be okay. Start with some light pressure. And dig in. You can see no scratches. So this finish is the best in the business. Test a small area here of the porcelain enamel. For comparison, clean that. And I did a small area here on the back, and I don't want to do any more because, as I was worried about, I think that is not going away. So as you can see, the overnight dry brine has done its magic. We're getting this nice dark color. So because of that, I'm going to want a bit of a binder. So I'm going to use a little bit of truff hot sauce, only a couple dabs on each side so that are too much. Let me spread that all the way around. Next, a thin layer of garlic powder and onion powder. Do this on both sides. We've already salt brined this, so we don't need a lot more salt, but I like just a little bit of salt in the surface of the crust so that you can appreciate that when you first bite in, even though that salt will have penetrated all the way down. So a light sprinkle of Lowry's. Repeat other side. I'm going to set my pepper cannon to a finer setting so that we don't get too large of pieces that will burn. Looks good. Sprinkle on a little bit on each side. Looks good. Grab a meter probe and install that right past the line. I think we're ready to get this on. Okay, I've settled things down from our break-in burn earlier where I was letting it up about 400 or 500. So we're now just below 250 degrees. So let's get our tomahawk on. I'm set up for indirect grilling, so the game plan is just to let this go. I'm going to set the meter app to 114 degrees Fahrenheit before pulling it off and letting it rest. It'll climb about 10 degrees while it's in the rest. Then we'll remove our heat deflector and let those flames fly for a great sear finish. See you in a little bit. Okay, I've just taken our steak off to rest, but while it's resting, let's get ready to switch to high heat. Move our deflector. Actually, I might just flip this for a minute, let that burn off. Okay, I've burnt off some of those oils. Drop in our grids. We're going to open our vents and let those flames fly. Okay, our steak has rested and we are nuclear temps. And while I don't want to hold my hand there too long, you can definitely tell there is some insulation like a Kamado where not all of that heat is coming out, because at 700 degrees, I wouldn't want to do that. So let's get this open, drop on our steak. It's good. Okay, our tomahawk looks amazing. Let's slice into it, see how we did. The crust on this definitely looks good. In hindsight, I think I would have liked to have the charcoal grate in the upper position so I could get a little bit closer to the coals, but I'm not going to complain about a Maillard reaction when it comes out like that. So let's get off our butcher's twine, get out a slice. Lovely. This will bloom out into a nice medium rare. Nice edges. Again, if we could have got a little bit closer to the coal, I think we could be even tighter next time, but I'll adjust my game plan. Let's get a slice here for taste test. Cheers. I love new grill break-in days because it means steak around here. Let's see how we did. That's a good steak. Well, no surprises here. The Summit Kamado can cook an amazing steak, but I think we all knew that going in. It's what comes next that I'm more excited about. So let me fill you in on what's coming next, as well as share my first impressions now that we've gone through everything from unboxing, our first burn-in, to our first cook, and what I'll be looking for in some of these future experiments. Okay, so first impressions. Starting off with the obvious that it's a Kamado. I love Kamados. They happen to be my favorite all-in-one grill category. And I'll use the analogy here like a sports utility vehicle. If you were to compare other single-purpose cookers, maybe something like my offsets behind me getting absolutely drenched in the rain, this could be like the transport truck. It's good for moving large volumes of whatever it is you might be cooking, brisket, ribs. You want to go all out. Something like an offset is great, but maybe that's not for everybody's everyday type cooking. Sticking with the SUV analogy, again, you can go capacity truck, you can go sports car, you can go minivan, practical family mover, you can go fuel efficient or electric, but few vehicles do all of those things as well as something like the sports utility vehicle. While the SUV isn't necessarily a better sports car or a better pickup or a better fuel miser than the best of breed, the ability to do all of these things with one vehicle is really attractive. And this is kind of the experience that you get with something like a Kamado, whether it's pizza or steak that we did today for a hot and fast grill, or low and slow capabilities. We want to do an all-day brisket or things like that. That just happens to be one of the reasons I am a huge fan of Kamado style grills. In terms of the Weber Summit in particular, what I'll be looking for is comparing how are the heat retention properties. One of the things that I've had a bad experience with a metal style Kamado in the past is they are too energy efficient. Things like the Broil King keg advertised double wall steel construction with oven grade insulation inside. And that's something where the Weber Summit isn't doing this. It's double walled, but it's kind of double walled like the semi-insulated firebox I have on my offset is, where there's two steel walls with air in between. So we're getting some heat retention, but not too much. That Broil King keg, I could almost cook a brisket with a handful of charcoal. It was amazing how long it would run on so little fuel. But as I've tested time and time again, fuel is flavor, and we want that fuel burning nice and clean. So that's a little bit of what's coming around the corner in terms of testing out the Summit. We're going to be testing the energy retention, get a couple low and slow cooks. Let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see on the Weber Summit. And of course, in the future, I'll be sure to do a head-to-head experiment. I'm sure you would like me to do that right away, but that's just not a fair comparison for any grill. Think about any grill you've ever owned. I bet your second cook was better than your first, your 10th was better than your second, your 20th, and so on and so forth. And as you get more experience, you learn the little nuances, the ins and outs. And I want to make sure if we're going to do a head-to-head, we put best foot forward from Kamado versus best foot forward from Weber and find out what the advantages of each are to help anybody still in the market trying to decide which Kamado might be right for them. That's it for today though. I'm James from Sokedad Barbecue signing off. Make sure you have the notification bell turned on so you're alerted when any of those head-to-heads or future cooks on the Summit or any of my other Kamados come out. But that's it for today. I'm James from Sokedad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.